is the second of our webinar series around the COVID-19 pandemic. We have put these series together for our members and businesses so you can have a chance to hear from and ask questions from the experts that we have in our business community. This morning we have two great professionals joining us. Ada is an HR professional and Marie is a certified Canadian training and development professional. Without further ado, let's get started. So Ada Tai has been working as an HR professional in a variety of industries and organizations for well over a decade. Through her consulting firm, Ada provides effective and pragmatic HR services and corporate training. She is able to strategically integrate effective HR processes, programs, and practices into clients' daily operations, as well as provide customized training sessions that align with clients' business objectives. Ada also provides personal job search and career coaching. In addition to all this, Ada is also an instructor at both the MacEwan University and the University of Alberta. We also have Marie Gervais with us. Marie is a certified Canadian training and development professional and a certified EFT coach and a credentialed evaluator with the Canadian Evaluation Society. Through her business, Shift Management, Dr. Gervais provides leadership training and coaching to businesses and industry through online courses and web coaching. She is also a sought-after speaker, writer, and podcast host.
So welcome, everybody. My name is Marie Gervais, and I have my colleague, Ada Tai, and we're just going to show you, this is our contact information, and just talk a little bit about how we met each other. So Ada and I met at a conference. I was presenting at the conference, and Ada came and talked to me afterwards, and from there, we have collaborated on quite a few professional things together, and we really enjoy working together. So whenever the opportunity comes up, we like to seize it. So when Kendra spoke to us about this webinar series, we were happy to do it jointly, right, Ada?
Yes, absolutely. And hello, everyone. This is Ada. So today, Marie and I are going to bring you different perspective on the personal as well as organizational human resources management best practices. So stay tuned. First of all, while we're in this COVID-19 situation, every business is suffering from smaller scale to bigger scale, but business still needs to operate. So how do we do that? To sustain operations, arranging and managing workers perhaps remotely or different methods, and then talk a little bit about temporary layoffs, as well as already talk about policies and procedures that you can think about, as well as the must-have policies for this situation.
And I'm going to speak with dealing with employee anxiety and helping employers and employees cope with uncertainty and how to work effectively in remote constrained environments. And the way we've structured this presentation is we're going back and forth. Sometimes it's one right to the next person, sometimes it's another one person going on for about a topic. And these four themes are incorporated throughout. So I'm going to say that the most important thing to do in a crisis situation is to start with yourself. And we are a combination of a mind, a body, and also emotions. We have the psychological makeup, and we have a spirit, and all of those things working together are who we are. And what we tend to do as adults is to say, well, I'm just going to make a logical decision when we're completely sabotaged by the emotions of panic. And there's actually a science behind that, which is that what happens is that when you are worried about something, significantly worried, and they're very much in a situation of uncertainty, all of the blood flows from the general flow around your brain into the back part of your brain, which is called the reptilian part of your brain, which is the freeze, fight, flight place. And when that happens, you actually are not thinking clearly, but you think you are. So your body is poised for danger, and you can't think clearly because there's no blood flow in the rest of your brain. So the thinking function is in the frontal cortex and the frontal lobes. And if there isn't enough blood flow in there, you can't think logically. But the survival part of your brain imagines that you are, because it's trying to survive. So that's why you have to work with your emotions and not against them. If you don't, your emotions will sabotage you. So the first and easiest way to do that is just to acknowledge that you feel something. And as adults, we're very much used to just pushing through things and not acknowledging that we feel anything. So to just say, I feel anxious, I feel worried, I feel, that there's an uncertainty in the future. I don't know if my business is going to collapse. All this is making me feel depressed. Just to acknowledge this to yourself. You don't need to stand on a rooftop, you need to tell anybody else about it. You just need to tell yourself and say, I feel this way. When you state that, and actually, if you say it to yourself in your mind, that's one step. Saying it out loud is another step, and writing it down is a third step. If you say it out loud or write it down, you are likely to let the emotion leave. So what happens is, instead of the emotion controlling you, the emotion actually normally dissipates and allows you to move to whatever the next stage would be. But until you acknowledge that you have that emotion, it will continue to control you, and it will keep sending the blood out of your thinking brain to the reptilian part of your brain, which means your decision making will be poor, even though you may be convinced that that isn't true. If you've ever talked to someone who says, I'm not mad, and you know for sure they're so mad you just want to back. If you start feeling worried, if you feel anxious, then you need to pull yourself back to saying, okay, how do I feel? Right? That's how I feel. Take a deep breath in, blow it out, and then you will start to get back into your thinking part of your brain. So then you can start thinking, okay, good, that's fine. If you're irritated, if you're snappy, if you're feeling like you want to withdraw, if you lose your appetite, any of those things are red flags that you're not acknowledging your emotions. As soon as you acknowledge them, a lot of stuff takes care of it itself. So I just wanted to get people started on that, because that is the first part of self-care, is acknowledging that you have all those parts of you. And your emotions are also a barometer for something that could be going wrong. So you can think about different parts of your business, like let's say operations, staffing, your finances and cash flow, your procedures and processes, your inventory. Just think about each of them and note how you feel about it. So the one where you feel the highest level of anxiety is the one where you need to say, I feel really anxious about this part of my business right now. Then take a deep breath in, blow it out, and you're going to come back to being able to deal with it. So that's another thing that you can do, a quick thing that you can do to help get back into the thinking part of your brain. Then you need to start asking yourself a few questions that are HR question related, not just people frequently go, oh, it's a big crash and we're not making sales and we can't have our store open, and so therefore we're going to cut everything and everybody. But that means you haven't acknowledged your emotions and you're not thinking correctly, right? So think, what has stopped, once you've gotten past that piece, what has stopped completely during COVID-19? And then what opportunities have opened up? Because there's always an opportunity somewhere. What is continuing or will continue as before? And what's your new normal? So COVID-19 is like having a baby. There's no going back to pre-baby. Once you've had the baby, you've become a family, and that's the way it is, right? So we are now in a new normal. Some of the things continue, but the new part of having had the baby is just going to keep on going. So if you can answer those questions, you're going to already start to calm yourself down, because you will have something that you're working from a reasonable place in your brain. Then the other part is, what HR decisions do you need to make based on these options? So making HR decisions once you've thought about these things is going to be smarter and better and more best for the immediate and also for the long term. And then we're going to look at how you'd identify essential tasks for HR decisions to make sure you're working with what you absolutely need right now, because we are in crisis mode. And then the other, finally, you're going to be starting to think, well, how do we start to train now at free, low cost, or competitive rate to be ready for the next wave when sales start up again? So we're going to get into that more, but that's why thinking about these questions can be very helpful. And then the next thing to focus on is cash flow. And the reason for that is because you can't make staffing decisions if you're worried about cash flow. So you start to think, where is cash coming in from, and what do we need to cut? This, again, is going to calm you down and going to allow you to make more rational decisions. So what is continuing to sell? What's emerged as a need in your industry or business as a new sales item? And for example, there are manufacturing companies that were not making masks before, and they weren't making hand sanitizers before, and now they are. Now they may not later. This may be temporary, but that's a new need that's emerged. So if you think, in my industry, what do people need? And if they don't need something specifically from your industry, how can you help people? If you keep thinking, how can I help people right now in this, you're going to come up with also a business response to it. So the other thing you can think about is, what's your team good at that you could sell as a service that people would need? So your team has learned some things, and you as a business owner have learned certain things. People may need that right now. So for example, my team has learned how to manage virtually very well. We've been doing it for many years. So that's something people need right now. So we know that's something we could sell. What could you produce that people need? So what service or what product, and what could you sell at a discount? Because right now people are looking for a discount and they're looking for value added. They want to make sure that what they're spending is going to bring them results. So you'll need to focus on what results this is bringing, and that would need to be real results, not made up results, but real results that respond to people's sense of urgency right now. And then look to what government funding you're eligible for and what loans you could be eligible for. And that should calm you down, because you're starting to think that cash can come in from a variety of places. And the next thing to think about is, what can you cut? So what are you paying for that you don't need? I discovered I was making automatic payments to 12 things through PayPal that I'm no longer using. So a good thing I cut that, because that gives me $300 a month more. Where can you reduce existing costs? And can you negotiate payment plans? One of my daughter-in-laws is a dentist. She shares a building with 5 other dentists. They got together with the landlord, and the landlord, before they'd even asked anything, the landlord said, I'm reducing your rent to 50%. If they hadn't initiated the meeting, nothing would have happened. And he said, if we're going 3 months with no income, I'll reduce the rent even further. Just, I need to cover my heating costs and I need to keep the building open and running. So we'll discuss it. They didn't even bring it up yet. So look at your supply chain and say, how can you negotiate payment plans? And then the other thing is, are all staff performing essential tasks and services? They may not be, and maybe they can focus only on essential tasks and services for the time being. Is there an overlap? Or you don't want any different people doing the same thing. So make sure that the rules are really clarified, and this is a good time to do that. So then the next is determining essential business operations and tasks. And that is Ada.
All right. So what are some of the essential tasks? In today's talk and presentation, I'm going to first share about what are they, and then who can deliver them, and how, in what methods these essential tasks can be delivered. So as a small business owner or any business owner, it's really critical that at any given time, we constantly ask ourselves, why are we in business? What are some of the critical functions we must produce, we must continue to operate in order to survive, in order to stay in business? So this will be your essential tasks, or other words, critical functions. So ask yourself, what are your essential tasks to maintain in business? And let's not forget that one common misunderstanding is that people in manufacturing, they think their essential task is to produce things. People in retail think their essential task is to sell to customers. I agree, those are all correct answers. But on top of that, if you don't have people buying, these essential tasks don't exist. So basically what I'm suggesting is to think about essential tasks away from just the day-to-day operations, but also thinking a step further is, how can we continue to maintain that confidence and communication with our customers, so with the customers. So very importantly, to start off with, they need to know you're still open. There are a few retail shops and restaurants that me and my family often go to, and I check on their website, no updates. I try to call the store, sometimes the phone gets picked up, sometimes they don't. So if that's your situation, make sure that your websites, your social media, your door signages, your phone messages, even if it's a voicemail, all of these things reflect that they're still open, but just serving customers in a different format. And
yeah,
also
maybe explain that format or how it's changed too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like banking hours, where they say we're open from this time to this time, and we're in this way, so you know how you can interact with the bank.
Great. And also how customers contact you. And perhaps if you operate a laundry facility or a dry clean, you don't want customers to come, or I mean, you want customers to come in, but customers are afraid to come in, but maybe you can do pickup and delivery. So that may add a little bit more extra income for you. So slightly change of the business model, but can still maintain your essential tasks. Can you still maintain your business in operations? To critical functions to maintain your business. And these non-essential tasks always exist, but now just ask yourself, where should I focus my energy? What's my priority? Okay, next slide. And this slide answers the question about who can deliver these critical functions or essential tasks. So on the top of the green circle, you see the workers or yourself, you're a small business owner, that you're already doing these essential tasks. So ask yourself, can my workers continue working? Perhaps your workers need to take care of sick family members or due to childcare because the kids are out of school now. So maybe they cannot continue the way they did in the past, or they cannot continue to do these essential tasks at all. And if that's the case, then you need to ask the people who were not doing these essential tasks in the past, but now can be back up or can be trained to deliver these essential tasks. So you always want to have a backup plan. Cross-training is always a great idea. Okay, next slide. And then this slide answers the question about how. So now can we do things the same way? If not, what kind of changes do we need to make? Is it a small change or is it a larger scale change? Or perhaps now the work needs to be delivered remotely, or some of tasks cannot be completed at all given the situation. The next set of questions will be, well, if that's the case, what are some of the changes I need to initiate? For a larger organization, it's definitely the updates to policies and procedures, which we'll get into today as well. So this is a really good time to check your policies and procedures to make sure they're up to date, and also that your workers are aware of these changes. You also want to make sure that people who are doing these tasks, especially when there are changes involved, are there any OHS, which means occupational health and safety implications? Are the workers now going to be doing work that's dangerous that they were not doing in the past? Were they provided proper PPE, personal protective equipment? Were they provided with proper training, proper procedure, documentations, communications? As well as that, are there any legal implications? So if we're reducing hours, if we're changing pay, all of these things could be leading into constructive dismissal. So always want to check with your HR professionals or your lawyers just to make sure that the changes you try to implement to stay in business are not imposing yourself into further legal risks.
Which is a big problem. I was speaking to a lawyer yesterday, and he said that they are already getting claims, litigation claims from employees who want to contest the fact that they were laid off. And that's going to be huge as soon as COVID-19 is lifted. So we should make sure you're making the decisions correctly in the first place, right, Ada?
Absolutely. So think through all of these things before you make these changes. Recently, I was just listening to the Harvard School of Business webinar on crisis leadership. So they call this a crisis situation. And the leaders who make the right decisions really take an iterative approach, which means one day at a time. Take one thing at a time and really thinking it through clearly and thoroughly. Avoid making rushed decisions that you regret later on. And also any infrastructure needed. So by infrastructure, I mean equipment, IT infrastructure, perhaps new software, perhaps it's a webinar or teleconferencing software or app. So whatever new infrastructure that you need in order for you and your workers to continue in operation, do you have enough budget? Is that soon enough? Can you get it soon enough? Discussed. First of all, you want to think through the critical tasks that you definitely want to have to maintain your operation, to sustain the business. And also who can deliver those? It could be the workers who are already doing them, or it could be somebody who is in your team now doing these essential tasks at the moment, but can now take up the duties. Or it could be yourself. And also what kind of changes, what kind of methods can we deliver these essential tasks? So all of this contribute to part of your business continuity planning. When I say business continuity planning, click please, Marie. When I say business continuity planning, I basically mean what are the things you need to do in order to prevent disasters from happening and also recover your business from these challenges. I see many business owners really panic in those crisis situations is because they never thought they would experience something like this we're experiencing right now. Never really have thought through these questions and never prepared themselves to continue their business even in challenges.
Right. Later we will be answering them, okay?
Awesome. So I was just mentioning that now we need to think about some changes we need to implement in the workplace. So we have identified essential tasks. I have identified who can do the work and who cannot do the work. So the workers who can continue working, delivering your essential duties. Now maybe it's the methods that need to be changed, or it could be the hours or the locations. Because the Alberta government has imposed that no gathering of more than 15 people in one location and has to be maintaining essential services. On top of that, people need to keep at least a 2-meter distance, right? So in order to be a good employer, maintaining your reputation, as well as the practicing best practices, there are some suggestions I have made to my clients going through this COVID-19 situation. One suggestion on the left-hand side of the screen you can see is to consider work staggered hours. By that, I mean you still maintain your core operating hours. But let's say if you have a team of 10 people, you may want to have some people, 5 of them come really early in the morning and finish up their shift, and then have the other 5 people start a little bit later. So there's less crossover between the people who are in one premise at any given time. Rotation of schedule is another consideration. This is something that I have helped one of my clients to implement. That organization has a team of 60 people, and they have 3 levels of buildings. So what we had done is to rotate people. 1 week, half of the company work from home, and then half of company work in the office, and be staggered through 3 levels. So given each level has only 5 to 10 employees at any given time. And also that what I had suggested to my clients would be offering flexible hours. Because now kids are out of school, parents are really just struggling parenting the kids at home while still doing some work. So they can sustain the job, they can sustain the income and expenses. So as an employer, I really suggest to my clients to be considerate, because we're all human beings. I mean, just as you have families to take care of, your business to take care of, same as our employees. So our employees, we can offer them flexible hours, as long as one way to do that is that as long as the productivity is there, as long as the results are being delivered, do we really care if they're there from 7 a.m. in the morning until whatever hours in the afternoon? As long as the core operating hours are being maintained. So you could have a longer lunch break. So let's say if they have small kids at home, they need to probably put the kids to sleep or feed them for lunch, whatever case may be, give them a longer lunch break. Or it could be that they work a little bit more hours in the evening or on the weekends, right? So as long as the work gets done. Job sharing. So the government of Canada has a job sharing program, and there are tons of resources about the different programs that the federal as well as provincial government have been offering to business owners to get over this period of time. So you're welcome to check. They're being updated as we speak at any given time. The job sharing is when employers are running out of cash. And I have learned that cash flow is a critical challenge for a lot of business owners at this moment. So when you're running low on cash, maybe considering reducing the hours, reducing the schedules, or share the work between usually two full-timers. Now they can be reduced to 2 part-timers and take advantage of the government program to subsidize the additional income. Or alternative work sites. So if you have multiple locations, be it small or large, and you really want to make sure there is social distancing, you can have an employee to work at a different location for the time being, maintain their job, but just keeping that distance. And then the reason I highlighted work remotely is because that's something I'm going to talk about later on with Marie. We're going to talk about the framework and policy. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see that for people who cannot continue what they had done in the past, whatever the jobs they had in the past, if they absolutely cannot continue the job in the past, before we go to layoff, is there anything else they can do in the interim? It could be, again, reduced hours, reduced responsibilities, or change of responsibilities, but is there anything that you can give them to do so they still have the job? If that's not possible, what are some of the leave of absence policies? And that's why I suggested at the beginning of the presentation, this is a good time to look at your employee handbook, to look at your policies and procedures, see what you can offer to your workers. If they're sick, or if they need to take care of sick family members, do you have some flexibility around your sick leave policy? Do you have short-term disability offering through your benefits package? What about personal days? Some organizations will offer personal days or floater days for employees to use in addition to their vacation time for whatever reason they need to use. vacation. So before you lay them off, maybe this is the time to have a discussion with your workers. Maybe exhaust your vacation days first, or exhaust your OT time first. If that's not possible, then of course, after you lay them off or terminate employees, those need to be paid out. And then the Alberta government employment standards, we have the up to 5 days unpaid job protected employee and family leave. And that period has just recently been stretched as long as we need during this COVID-19 situation, or as long as the provincial government give us another update. So those are unpaid, but job protected leaves that employees can take advantage of. Or retirement. And I have seen some organizations take advantage of this time to say to their workers, maybe this is a time that you have accumulated good pension or RSP. It's a time to consider retirement or semi-retirement. And layoff is temporary layoff. I've heard from the chamber that is one of the reasons they ask us to put on this webinar is to talk about layoff. And in my opinion, as an HR person, layoff is always the last resort. If you absolutely have exhausted all your resources and you can absolutely do nothing but to lay employees off, well, then let's talk about it.
And Ada is going to talk in detail about temporary layoffs and from HR policy perspective.
Yes, so temporary layoff, as the term suggests, is temporary. The intent of the layoff is still for you, the business owner, the employer, to maintain that employment relationship over and be aware of the changes. So I copy and paste this slide from the Alberta government website, and there is a link. So after we send out those slides to you, you're welcome to check the link. I would suggest to keep that, save that in your bookmark. I go to that website every day just to see if there are new updates. So there are a couple changes that you need to be aware of before you consider the layoff. So the 24-hour written notice requirement for shift change has been removed for the COVID-19 pandemic situation. You're also not required to give 2 weeks notice to change for shift schedules for people under the averaging agreement. And also there is no need to provide layoff notice as in the past. So in the past, according to the Alberta Labor Code, we are required as employer to give 7 days notice in writing before layoff if the worker has been working for us less than 2 years, or 2 weeks of notice if they have been working with us for more than 2 years. So right now, this is unforeseen circumstances that is saying that it's okay for employers now to give these notices as in the past. However, the best practice is you want to give as much notice as you possibly can. It may not be 7 days, may not be 2 weeks, but give as much notice as you possibly can. Oh, and one more thing is that the temporary layoff period has been stretched from the 2 months, which is 60 days, to 4 months, which is 120 days. So during the temporary layoff, what do you need to do as an employer? First of all, when you definitely have to lay somebody off, you want to provide that in writing. And so also state, again, that the intent is to keep the long-term employment relationship, but it's just that during this duration of time, we have to lay you off. One is the effective date. Again, as I mentioned, you still want to give notice just as a good employer for a good cause. And so even though you may not be able to maintain a 7 day or 2 weeks notice period, you still want to give as much as possible. So when you think about your temporary layoff notice with the effective date, you do want to take that into consideration. And also include a copy of the code, the labor standards code, which is I quoted here on the slide, page 58 to page 60. So as you deliver your notice to the worker, you want to attach a copy of that. And personal suggestion, I would also attach the website where the Alberta government's employment standards talk about the changes to the employee. And I think if I put myself into a worker's shoe, I understand this is a devastating situation for everyone, the government, the employer, the employees, and families. So as an employee, I understand, I want to understand my employer lays me off for good reasons because they cannot sustain operations. So they have no choice but to lay me off for temporary duration. So in that situation, as long as my employer keeps communication open with me, being transparent, being sincere, I still want to work with this employer going the long term.
Mm-hmm. What also happens during this time is, and I have had quite a few new coaching clients coming to me and saying that, you know what, this was my opportunity. I never liked working there anyway. So when they said temporary layoff, I said, just make it permanent. You might lose staff as well.
True enough.
Yeah.
It's a changing time, yes. And then I just quoted this from the Labor Code standard. So Section 663 talks about the 100. So now it's always been 60 days, although 120 days period is considered temporary layoff. Day 61 is considered termination if you cannot recall the workers. So now that 60 days have been stretched into 120 days, just make sure that you make a note for yourself. Is considered temporary termination. So after 120 days, if you still cannot recall the workers back to work, then termination pay and procedure apply, which means you need to pay out the outstanding wages, outstanding vacation accrued, outstanding overtime accrued, and the legally required notice period, and or severance case-by-case situation. However, the legislation also speaks to that if during the temporary layoff, you still pays the workers in some format. It could be a reduced wage so they can receive the subsidies or top up from the government. Or it could be that you continue to pay the workers benefits insurance premium. And you do not need to cover the full benefits insurance premium for both the workers as well as employers portion. As long as you cover the employers portion, it can still consider that you're maintaining that relationship over the long employment relationship over the long term, and you can negotiate for the workers to agree to extend your temporary layoff for beyond 120 days.
You know, I really like your focus, Ada, on the maintaining relationships. So earlier we said maintain your relationships with your customers by letting them know what's going on and how they can contact you as one way. And this one is maintaining your relationship with your employees so that, you know, they when they leave on good terms. And if they don't leave, they feel that they've been treated fairly, right?
Absolutely. And as an HR person, I always advocate for good business reputation because I run my own small HR consulting business. I know how hard it is to build your business, but how easy it is to destroy the reputation.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about, this is my model for having a really strong workplace culture and also a strong relationship with your customers, and it pays back in dividends, and it also pays back exponentially if you follow all four. So safety is the first one, physical safety, but also psychological safety. If people enjoy working for you and they are excited to be there, and when they're working remotely, they still feel that it's a nice workplace culture and that people are treating them respectfully and speaking to them respectfully, and they are also doing the same thing. That safety, both physical and psychological, is very important. And also to know now that employers can be taken to court for having a toxic workplace environment, and this was increasing significantly before COVID, and I imagine it will be after as well. So it is an imperative for employers to think all the time about not just the physical safety, but the psychological safety of their workplace. And that all boils down to how would you like to be treated with respect, and how would you like them to be treated with respect, and how can you maintain that respectful workplace? And the next one is well-being. And that is that to be conscious of the fact that people are in a situation where they have multiple responsibilities and multiple stresses. And so what are your multiple stresses and responsibilities? And if you don't know what it is for your employees, ask them, because they can make it a bit clear. For example, they may not have a workspace. They may be having to work virtually, but they have no space to do it at home. So can you get some ideas for how you could set that up? I have employees all over the world. They're actually subcontractors, and I have one person she has a curtain behind her that's her workspace, and her family knows to leave her alone. She lives in a very small space with a family, and they know that when she's behind the curtain, mommy is working. And so setting that curtain up was really significant, and it was a small thing, but it was something that I could contribute to help her to do, so that she felt that she had a workspace and she could do her job for me. So well-being is part of that. And the other part is encouragement. We actually live in a highly critical and criticism-oriented society. We don't have an encouragement-oriented society. And people improve much more from encouragement than they do through anything else. And if they improve through fear, it's temporary. If they improve through encouragement, it's sustained. So how can you encourage your employees? How can you encourage them to encourage each other and have them encourage you? A climate of encouragement is significant for maintaining a workplace that is solid and will be sustained and able to move forward. And the last one is learning. If you're learning now, you're almost forced to learn about things that you haven't learned about before. If you don't take advantage of this, you will be redundant. Just like those seed companies that I don't think they're going to be in business in a year because they're losing everything now and they haven't adjusted. So what do you need to learn? How can you learn? What's the most critical thing to learn? So it looks like this. As an employer, your responsibilities are for the physical and psychological safety of your employees. For their well-being, you need to have realistic expectations about what they can do in the new normal. And find out, if you don't know how long it takes them to do something or what is involved, ask them and they'll tell you. People's jobs evolve and change, and we are not aware of it if we're not doing it. The expert is the person who's closest to the job, so ask them, get feedback from them, and share information. The biggest stress for employees when they're in a workplace they feel is unhealthy is that information is not shared. So people feel that, personally slighted if information isn't shared with them. In my company, I share my financial status with my employees. I say, this is where we're at. This is how much money we made this month. This is the goal. This is where we fell short. This is where we went forward. This is where we are right now. So I don't just share information and resources. I also share the finances with them. And as a result, I have very loyal employees who are just behind making the business work because they realize what they need to do as participants in making sure we all can live. Encouragement is support and acknowledge and provide the necessary resources for your employees. And then if they need virtual tools, training, preparation for new roles, consider it and see how you can do it. The employee also has responsibilities under the SWELL method, safety, well-being, encouragement, and learning. And the first thing is that if you're working either on-site or off-site virtually, you need to stay healthy, exercise, and take breaks because the stress is much higher and you're much more likely to have an accident. You're more likely to have a problem right now, so you need to think about take charge and responsibility for your own safety and your own health, and then set up your home environment for work I mentioned before. And this is also a good chance to step up your game. And if you were not good at being routine or scheduled or setting up an environment where your kids do their work in a certain time and there's quiet time and there's you working here without being interrupted, and then there's time that you're together.
On to the topic about managing workers with different methods. The telecommuting has come up front and center for many businesses. If your business have not been set up to work remotely and this is your first time going through it, I know it can be really overwhelming. But from an HR and organization management perspective, there are a few things I would like to make suggestions of. First of all, you want to have a remote work policy. Some businesses even have pandemic plan policy. Some will have their business continuity plan already in place. But if your business do not have that, my suggestion is at least have a remote work policy. So in your remote work policy, first of all, you want to discuss what's the intent of this policy and who this policy applies to. Is it just your full-time workers, or is it also applies to your contractors, owners, so whoever applies to. And who will be affected by this policy, as well as who is responsible for doing what in your organization that's now remotely set up. And also remind your employees who are being assigned to work remotely, they actually should be grateful that they still have a job in this situation. So as an employee, they still need to maintain attendance. Although we've talked about being flexible in terms of the hours and staggered employees, rotate their schedule just to maintain operations during this time, the employees still need to maintain a certain attendance. Really depends on your business. So what are the core hours the employees need to be online, be available online, be available over the phone or text messages, whatever the way you deliver your business. And also they maintain internal, external communications meetings. So if you're a manager or if you're a business owner, make sure you talk to your employees about your expectation of them communicating with you. So for the chamber, I learned that every morning the employees will have a daily meeting. So that's the time for the CEO to assign tasks, check in on everybody, which is great practice. You do want to, as an owner, as a manager, you do want to check in regularly with your employees, making sure they're progressing well, they are supported, answers questions are being answered, and also the challenges are being acknowledged and removed.
Just had a new format to do it in.
That's right. And I think that this COVID-19 teaches business many things. One thing definitely is to use technology. The other thing is definitely about efficiency. In the past, I've worked with organizational clients who always drag on really, really long meetings. But now, since the meetings are just the stand-up meetings, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, debrief, check-in, and then off you go. So I think that's going to be a good practice if we can continue doing as a society. That would be great. The other thing you want to maintain communication is with your external, whether it's contractors, vendors, or customers, or suppliers, whoever the case may be. We talk about the dress code, performance, and workstation. The employee still needs to maintain the confidentiality and privacy of the workers' or customers' information, as well as the data security, so they need to use a reliable and secure network. Health and safety standards for home office is a little bit different than if they're working in the office, or in a manufacturing setting, or whatever setting you have in your operations. At home, they need to be reminded to watch fire hazards as well as tripping hazards, and also stretch on a regular basis. You also want to remind your employees of the policies they need to be aware of, attendance, dress code, professional conduct, health and safety, and etc. Just because they're working from home, they still need to understand the policies of your organizations.
So if you're a small business owner, you might not have any policies. This is a good chance to talk to an HR professional and set some of the basic ones up, right, Ada?
Absolutely, and just great point. One more thing I want to remind everybody is the social media policy. So now people have more time to be online. Just make sure that what they post is being responsible.
So to prepare for sales to start again, it's important to think that, COVID-19 is temporary, although it has changed the way we're doing things, and we're probably going to keep a lot of the stuff we've implemented new now. We'll keep it. We won't lose it. We'll keep a lot of our old processes, but we won't keep all of them. We will have a lot of things completely different. Just think back to this idea of having a baby. Stuff changes, some things fall to the wayside, and other things crop up. So once the baby is older, you might be able to go out on a date with your husband or your significant other. And initially you think that could never happen again for the rest of your life. We're kind of like that for COVID-19. We're thinking we're never going to go out on a date again, but we actually will be able to. We just have to make arrangements for a babysitter. So all of those, those are the things that are going to change. So when the business starts up again, who needs to be trained? Again, you're looking at the parenting idea. Maybe you're going to need to think, who would you choose as a babysitter, and put that in place now, so that when that option is available, you can put it in place. Are there new skills or positions you're going to need to fill quickly? So, and if so, then you should start thinking about that now and have the job descriptions ready and the way you want to do it ready. And are there workflows and standard operating procedures that could be started or that could be improved for better efficiency? And one of these is a great opportunity to start getting some policies down for your small business if you don't have them yet. Are any positions going to become redundant because of technology? And if so, what do you need to do about that?
It's a reminder to everybody that now it's a situation to examine what we do on a daily basis. We don't know what we don't know, and things are keep updating every day. So make sure that you take a deep breath and take an agile approach, which means iterative, and to adjust your practices as we go. And those are the messages that employees need to hear as well, is that you're giving your best efforts. And this is the best decision you can make given the resources and knowledge that you have. Also want to keep communications open with both employees and customers, and be creative in what your business can do. Maybe it's a slight change in your business model, maybe a slight change in their delivery methods, but you can still maintain your operations. And also take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else.
Mm-hmm. So we put some links together for you, and the first one is a great blog post that Ada wrote that is about benefits.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about that, Ada?
Yeah, so recently I just published a blog on my website with a benefits broker about the critical benefits to keep for employees during a health crisis like what we're in right now. And so what I suggested, one thing that's really cheap to set up is Employee Family Assistance Program. So it's very cheap for employers to pay as part of your benefits program, but it's a short-term counseling, confidential for both employees or their dependents to talk to a counselor or psychologist about issues that's bothering them mentally. Other things that the two web links that I've already shared is about employment standards, the changes, as well as the labor standards code. So we'll send the slides out to you, and you can keep updated with these websites.
And the one that I added at the end is the Help Managing a Virtual Team 101, and it's everything you need to know to manage effectively virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for business owners and managers, if you need help with policies, procedures, as well as managing employee issues or talents, so let me know. I also coach individuals to find work.
And then also managers that want to up their game. And then we also do training for supervisory leadership and help workplaces strategize. So in addition to that, I'm most happy to help anyone with setting things up virtually because we have a lot of years of experience. We've been doing it 12 years, but 6 years really intensely and entirely pretty much 99% of what we do. So I've run across every obstacle you possibly could, and a little quick phone call can help settle things, so feel free to do that.
Yes, definitely. So if you guys have any questions afterwards, if you're at home tonight and you're like, oh crap, I should have asked them this, you can definitely email both Marie or Ada, or email the chamber here and we can pass that question along to them as well. So yes, thank you, Ada and Marie. This was definitely great information. I think you touched base on a lot of things that some of our members and employers had questions about. So we definitely appreciate you taking your time out of the day to share this information with us. And just before we wrap up, I would like to thank all of our members for their support and for trusting us as your Chamber of Commerce. We are working diligently to provide you the information you need and to get you the answers to your questions.